Okay. We'll call the Senate Election Law and Municipal Affairs Committee meeting to order, and it won't be long. We will go into a recess waiting for a document. One thing that we can take up before, first, I guess I need a motion to go into executive session.
Second.
I have a motion second to go into executive session. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say nay. We are in executive session. Is received a request on making a recommendation on Senate Bill 586, whether to concur, not concur, or not concur, and request a current meeting of conference. The chair has heard from Senator Perkins Quokka officially on not concur, and chair wants to concur.
Yeah, not concur.
Not concur,
Concur.
Concur.
and that will be the recommendation. And with that, we are going to be in recess for
I'm gonna run over to LLS
probably
right
10
now.
minutes.
All right. I saw Alex was the drafter.
Yeah, that was that. come out of recess. Current status is that we are in executive session, and I will take a motion.
We're in executive session.
We are in executive.
Ought to pass on HB 1300.
Senator Lang moves ought to pass, and I will second.
And I'll move amendment number 1840S. I'd like to speak to the amendment.
1840S, Senator Lang, and I'll second. Senator Lang.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. So I don't think it comes as a surprise to anybody that the number one thing that we're hearing from our voters is property taxes, property taxes, property taxes. And as we know, property taxes are a result of spending, right? The taxes go up if you spend more, taxes go down if you spend less. It's a pretty straightforward discussion. So while I appreciated this bill, what I didn't like about the original bill was that the ongoing permanent nature of every year for the next every other year for 2 years, we were going to have to vote on this. And so I think the voters need to have a voice. What this did was I limited this to a one-time question on the November ballot that will ask the voters, do you want a property tax cap or not? And let them make the call. And then it goes away. But allowing the one-time question, again, probably more than any other year in what's going into my 6th election cycle, I've heard property taxes being the number one thing. So let's let the voters decide whether they want to cap the growth that's happening in their communities on the spending side. Again, as I said, that taxes are, that famous quote from the New Hampshire governor, that low taxes are a result of low spending, right? So let's see if we can manage and control the spending and give the voters that choice. If they don't want it, they can vote it down, and then they don't have a cap and they don't have to deal with it again.
Further comments? Senator Crawford.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. So, I'll be voting against this bill because I just think this is a mandate that we don't need. If local cities and towns want to address the question of a tax cap, they have the ability to do that now under RSA 32(5)(b). Of course, costs are a concern for our constituents because costs are out of control everywhere, and property taxes are a piece of that. Part of the reason local property taxes are going up is because the state is not honoring its obligations on a variety of fronts, including funneling $160 million into unaccountable school vouchers. And so, of course, our taxpayers are feeling the crunch of those costs going up at the local level. This bill essentially creates an override of local control, mandating something that cities and towns can now do. Optionally, it creates extra costs for our taxpayers, actually, because it creates additional administrative burdens for our clerks to administer elections. It creates an extra ballot that needs to be printed, creates extra sort of education that needs to go on a question that if our cities and towns want to raise, they have the ability to bring that forth locally now. So I think mandating to our cities and towns how they run themselves is not our job in Concord. Our job in Concord is to make sure we're taking care of our constituents' most core needs, which at this time are housing, childcare, energy costs, and healthcare. This bill does not address those. It just creates a mandate from Concord on how our cities and towns should run themselves.
Senator Long.
Is this just on the amendment or on the?
You can comment on anything you want. I'm
All right,
not going to restrict it.
Thank you. Yeah, I have an issue with administrative budgets. Behavioral health is administrative. Therapy is administrative. If there's a teacher or a classmate passes, that's administrative when they have people there to talk to the kids. High school students applying for college, that's administrative. And I'm wondering if the insurance is included in that. It has HR. I don't know if HR covers insurance. Insurance has been going up. I know in Manchester, 10, 12, 14% every year. And this would limit that. Then also on I question why this bill mentions municipalities and wards served. So sometimes when I read this, it looks like if there's a ward, let's say in Manchester, there's 12 wards, 4 of the 12 wards, 3/5 get a 3/5 vote. is that it doesn't say 3/5 municipalities. It says 3/5 municipalities and wards served. So I don't know why it wouldn't just be municipalities. The city of Manchester, by a vote of 3/5, approved this. It says wards also, and I don't understand that. You know, like I said, 4 out of 12 wards. Would that be a 25%? I'm confused in that, why they included wards, and not just municipalities. And I know in our charter, the city of Manchester has a charter, tax cap and, revenue, cap. So this would, if, let's say the city of Manchester voted for this, would the revenue cap still be included, or would that be excluded? I don't understand, because they're just voting for this. So if it's lower than the municipality, then it would be in effect. And would the revenue cap not be included in that? In our charter, starts off with, by keeping local control, here's what we do in our charter, which is state approved our charter. And this takes that control, away. You know, we have a cap, we have, you know, so adding this, I think, adds more confusion to the voters.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. I just comment, you know, the bill as it came over from the House, I thought was, I was lukewarm to say the best on it. You know, I felt that the underlying bill as it came over was heavy-handed. I felt that there are mechanisms in place to do this already. We all know that property taxes are a function or are voted on in our local municipalities. In my municipalities, more times than not, they are voted and approved, and it goes on as is, frustratingly. I don't think that the outcome is going to change with that. I think that based on the behavior we've seen, I don't think the outcome is going to change. I do understand, though, that this is a compromise. This is a one-time only amendment where it would, you know, put the question on the ballot one time in 2026. I'm willing to support that compromise, but going forward, I think that I'm going to be very watching this topic very closely to ensure that, you know, we're not doing this over and over and over and over again. I think that's you know, I think that I could live with one time as it's written in the amendment, and I will support the amendment.
Senator Perkins Walker.
Yeah, I just want to respond to what was just raised by my colleague. So I think, you know, if the concern is to do this one time, there's actually, the amendment creates confusion because on page 3 of the original bill, lines 6 through 8, it reads, if the local tax cap question is rejected in a school district, the local tax cap limitation shall not apply for the next 2 fiscal years, but the question shall appear again on a separate official ballot or local ballot during the next even numbered year's November general election. So that's at least one way that I've caught that, you know, this is not a one-time question, even with the amendment. I haven't had a chance to look through and see if there are others, but, you know, I think additionally, the amendment does not fix the fact that folks won't even know what they're voting on. I mean, we've got extensive comments from DRA in terms of figuring out what net new taxable property growth is. I mean, the question that's going to be placed before the voters is this long. You know, there's been no discussion about what exactly that means. You know, costs for bonded capital projects are excluded. This fixed cap applies only to administrative operations and does not affect classroom instruction, school-based services, or other municipal expenditures. I mean, I think my colleague has done a great job raising the fact that, you know, we don't know what that means. What positions would be limited by this and what wouldn't? You know, how do we know what affects classroom instruction? Does coming to school hungry affect classroom instruction? Does not being supported at home affect classroom instruction? What are school-based services? That's not outlined here. And so you're mandating putting in front of the voters a question that's poorly drafted at minimum and harmful, at maximum. So I think there's clearly some issues here that this bill is not ready to send to our cities and towns and put a new mandate on them. Again, it's just going to drive up costs because we're going to create additional costs. We're going to have to do a lot of education on the local level based on this drafting, and it's going to be unclear what's being cut and what's not, what fits inside of that, what's not. I mean, it's just another, death by a thousand paper cuts to these schools that are just trying to educate our kids. And instead they're just getting mandate after mandate after mandate from the state level. That's just driving up costs, and then being criticized for that also from the state level.
All right. What I'm going to do is put us back into recess. I'm going to ask Senator Perkins Spoka and Senator Lang to get together and see if we can't work out some of those problems. And so we will be in recess for at least 15 minutes, probably more likely half hour to an hour. So we're in recess. Hit your buttons. we're going to come out of recess and go back into recess, and the time will be 11:45 when we're expected to be back. go back into session. I did want to make some comments about the bill. Everybody else has talked, so, but I wanted to talk. One of the reasons for this bill and some of the others that we've had, especially with the SB2 election and stuff, is that when I'm at a town meeting, and certainly only two of the senators here on the committee, are town people, the rest of us, live and work in cities, that there's been a lot of reports that there are various strategies that are being implemented at town meetings to influence votes. Long readings of spreadsheets, until people leave and then take a vote, holding votes off until midnight or after, especially where there's people with children. And that's one of the sentiments for this bill, okay? And certainly the changes that we've been talking about in this committee is not having it happen every 2 years, but maybe letting it happen just once. And that's part of what we expect in this next amendment. So, in reality, when you look at the number of voters that we're going to get on this issue, that the percentages are going to be 60% to 80% if I do it during a general election. But if I do it during a town meeting, I mean, even in the city of Rochester, if I get 20% at a city election, that's a great turnout, okay? And so allowing more of the voters. Now, we've gotten an awful lot of emails. I'm sure all of the committee members have gotten the same ones that I've gotten that talk about choice, okay? So why should 20% be the ones that get that choice? Why not the 60 to 80% of those people getting the choice? So those are part of the sentiments behind this bill and the bills that we've gotten and other things, is that there are allegedly, and I don't have any information that says these things were happening other than the testimony of the people that have come in, that there are people who try to manipulate the town meeting to either pass something or make it so that it won't be passed. So with that, I think our amendment is coming through the door now. And
That's actually Sonia, but
well, Sonia had papers in her hand, and everyone's happy to see Sonia because we want to get out of here, right?
I had a
Certainly.
question.
Send it
I
along.
was just reading the DRA's communication that they sent us,
Yeah.
and I'm not sure if they still need rulemaking authority.
we can talk about that when we get back into the meeting. You ready?
We are in the meeting.
All right, so I'm going to withdraw my motion on the previous amendment and offer amendment number 1843S. And I'll speak to the amendment as drafted.
And I will second that.
So again, a couple changes. So the original two changes are still in there. This is relative to only the 26 election. On the original bill, on what was line 26, we struck the words "for the next 2 years" because this isn't going to happen every 2 years. This is a one-time vote. So we struck it from that line. On page 2 of the original bill, we struck on line 9 the same thing. The end of that sentence on line 9 where it says "for the next 2 fiscal years," we struck it. On page 2, at the end of line 21 on the original bill, we struck again "for the next 2 fiscal years" again. On page 3, section 4A, we struck the entire last sentence that starts with "if the local tax cap question is rejected." We struck that entire sentence. We did the same thing in letter B on page 3. We struck line 14 where it says if the fixed cap question is rejected. We struck all of that sentence. On page 4, there was no change to the bill whatsoever. On page 5, we struck on line 2, the sentence says any tax rate set in violation of this section shall be void. on page 5 as well, on line 20. We changed the word commissioner at the end of line 20 to governing body. And we did that same change on line 27. Again, if there's going to be a reduction in the budget based on the fact they went over the tax cap, we think the governing body should be making that change, and not the commissioner at DRA should be making that change to the local budget. And then lastly, on page 6, on line 15, we struck, starting with the sentence that starts, no exclusion shall apply to bonded indebtedness, all the way through number 6. That was a bill we've already previously had and we've already killed. And I just keeping this law in alignment with our previous actions within this committee. So that is the amendment. The question is whether or not, the one thing that's not in here is rulemaking authority for the DRA. I don't think they need it as chair of GELCAR, because anytime we change a law, create a law that creates work at an agency, they have automatic 541A privileges. We could add it if we want to be specific as a committee amendment, but I just don't think it's necessary. But if it makes everybody feel warm and fuzzy, then I'll add it.
DRA, come on up. Scoot that mic over towards you. All right. All that stuff that you said on the way up, you have to repeat it.
Will do. Jennifer Ramsey, Tax Policy Counsel for the Department of Revenue Administration. It would, I think, help make things more clear if it's not a big imposition to go ahead and include it in the bill. We would appreciate that.
So, Mr. Chair, if we pass this amendment, I'll add as a committee amendment the addition to 541A language to grant rulemaking authority to the agency.
All right. The question that I have, and generally that's the case, is that you've already got rulemaking authority for that section of the RSA. So it would be, in my opinion, it may be redundant, but I don't know that you do have specific authority in that RSA.
And I don't know, without going back and looking, I don't know that either, but it would be helpful to say that the DRA shall make rules to implement this chapter. Then there would be no question, and we would not have to be in doubt about the expectation of the committee with respect to implementing the bill.
Okay. Thank you very much.
If I may, you also submitted some other concerns with this bill. And, I participated in some changes to this amendment to hopefully make it more workable for our cities and towns. I still have deep concerns with passing this bill. And so I just wanted to address the fact that, this will still use, for example, the term bonded capital costs. It'll still use, net new property growth, new taxable property growth. So, I have certainly guesses at how we could arrive at those, but you've sort of raised concerns about how the department can assess those and maybe how much additional workload that's going to produce for the department. Could you speak to that?
Sure. So it depends. Thank you for the question. It depends upon how you interpret the department's role with respect to certifying in those two areas. There's a way to interpret the language in the bill which would suggest that what we would do is simply review the submissions of the municipalities to us, look for obvious mathing issues, things that are inconsistent with the submissions from the prior year. Those are things we do now. And if that's what's required for certification for DRA, then that would not require additional personnel. My concern was that there might be an intention to look behind the numbers that we receive from the municipalities and actually go into the districts and look at books and records to confirm that the numbers that they were reporting to us were good numbers. That would be an expansion of our existing role and would require additional work, potentially additional personnel on our part. If the committee made no changes, I've been on the record saying this, if you don't give me additional personnel or additional appropriations in light of my comments, I'm going to assume that the intention is the more narrow certification rather than the broader one.
Okay. Follow up if I may, sir.
Follow up.
That's helpful. And in addition to that, I guess there's also questions like, for example, as amended, the language reads, bonded capital costs shall include principal or interest on bonds or notes only if the bonded indebtedness is issued solely for the acquisition, construction, or major structural renovation of real property reported pursuant to RSA 198.4A. So just as one example of a place where that interpretation could come into question, and Senator Lang and I discussed this, on line 30, it says real property. Well, does that include fixtures? Does it include equipment? Does the equipment under lease count as a fixture? Does that constitute real property? I mean, there are still questions here for interpretation. Are those things that can easily be reported, and can you verify compliance with the cap without sort of further investigation?
Can I ask Mr. Knur to come up and help with
Yeah,
that?
sure.
We are now in an area that is his expertise and not mine.
Sure.
Yes, for the record, I'm Bruce Knur, Supervisor of the Municipal Bureau at DRA. Senator, in response to your question, I believe we would have to have the school district supply some additional information in addition to what is normally supplied in the budget. We don't have that kind of detail. We'll see the bonded principal and interest amounts, but we know nothing about from where it's derived. So if we needed to exclude a portion of that, they'd have to identify that for us in the budgeting process so we could see it.
Okay, that's helpful. And lastly, if I may, Chairman, I just want to try to understand this bill before it gets passed. So one of the notes you made in your submitted testimony was SAUs do not make appropriations or have separately determined tax rates. Their budgeted expenses are voted on in advance of the school district budgets, portioned to the administered district and contained within the district's appropriation. It is therefore unclear to DRA how it would administer a reporting requirement and apply a cap to an SAU budget separately from the district it serves. Is there anything there you would like to elaborate on in terms of just understanding administratively how this is going to work?
We'd have to establish a clear delineation of it's fairly clear right now, the SAU appropriation inside of a budget. We've just never examined it in relation to a cap. So I think it would be a procedural step for us. I believe the information would be there. We would just have to apply a step that hasn't been applied before.
If I could, if I could add to Mr. Knur's answer, I would say that I think a part of the reason for rulemaking instructions is because I think we would potentially need to modify some of the forms and reporting requirements to make sure that we have that information captured in such a way that we can apply a separate cap for the SAU portion of a local budget. I think there's some language in the bill that might talk about capping taxes for SAUs. In an ideal world, that would be made more clear that we're talking about the cap on the portion of the budget separately from the budget as a whole.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. Senator Lang.
So again, Mr. Chair, I had a conversation with Jennifer from the DRA earlier, and again, we think we can capture most of this through rulemaking, and some of it may be requirement. Again, my opinion is that their responsibility is to just look at the information that's provided by the municipality, and at the end say this meets or does not meet the budget cap. If it does not meet the budget cap, it goes back to the, again, with the change to the governing body, it goes back to the governing body and say, you need to cut $150,000 in order to meet the tax cap. Figure out where you're going to do that and resubmit your budget for us, and then that would be readjusted.
All right.
So
We'll take a vote on amendment 1843S. All right. We're voting just on the amendment this time. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say nay. Ayes have it. And now we'll talk about the committee amendment to add rulemaking.
So
It
Mr.
would appear that on line 26 of the original bill, that the effective date would move down to section 3. There'd be a new section put in, section 2. And did you want to give me those words for the rulemaking authority? I want you to be happy, so, you know.
Thank you, Senator. I would suggest that you say the Department of Revenue Administration shall adopt rules and forms for the purpose of implementation of this.
I can't write that fast.
Sorry,
Department of Revenue Administration shall adopt.
rules
Yep.
and promulgate forms.
Promulgate. Goodness gracious.
Isn't that a good word? I love promulgate. Promulgate forms necessary to implement this chapter.
Mr. Chairman, can I just add one thing to that?
Yep.
Just make sure you say pursuant to RSA 541A, so you meet all the requirements around the rules. They're not allowed to get outside those rulemaking.
Yeah, at the end is I think where that usually is. Yep.
Yeah.
Pursuant to RSA
541-A.
541-A. Want to understand?
Yep.
Jessica, do you think you got it?
I think I got it. I know it.
All right, read it back.
All right, so we are putting in the Department of Revenue Administration shall adopt rules and promulgate forms necessary to implement this chapter pursuant to RSA 541A.
Everybody understand what we're voting on? This is a vote just on the committee amendment.
That's number 2, and the effective date is number 3.
Correct. Has to be renumbered. Okay, so for the committee amendment, all those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed say nay. The ayes have it. Now we're voting on the bill as amended.
Discussion, Mr. Chairman.
Certainly.
Final discussion. Looking at the amendment, page 5, line 18. It mentioned following fiscal 2 years. I don't know if that was.
Page 5.
Do I have the right amendment here?
Yep, yeah, you do. Let me see that.
1843. So the way I read it, it would, the tax cap would be, as this reads, for 2 years.
Mr. Chair, for the committee amendment would be to strike that for the following 2 years. Rebecca and I missed that.
Oh, no, you missed it. Okay.
Let's strike this.
So the committee amendment, just to be clear, is striking for the following 2 fiscal years.
Correct.
You guys okay?
I'm gonna vote against it, but I understand.
Maybe you're not voting apart against this part. All right, so there's a further committee amendment to strike those few words on line 18 on page 5. Any other discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say nay.
Nay.
Right, so 3-2. Okay, now we're voting on the bill as amended and with both committee amendments. All rolled into one. Further discussion?
Yeah, so Chairman, as noted, this bill seems like yet another state mandate overriding local control that's going to drive up costs, in your own home city of Rochester where you have a tax cap. This will mandate a second ballot and really a lot of administrative work that is likely to result in nothing. And so I think just overall this, as I said earlier, sort of continues this pattern of us telling municipalities how they should run themselves, creating additional local mandates, driving up costs, and then blaming our cities and towns for problems that we've created. So, I think it's important. We've had a great focus on cost this legislative year. I think lowering property taxes is something everyone is interested in. I do not believe this is the way to do it. I think it's through earnest work that actually allows cities and towns to lead and determine their own, commitment to various issues. But we're doing very little of that in Concord this year. So I don't think this bill is necessary. I think if our communities were interested in it, they could do it themselves. And ultimately, I think it's going to cost us money and drive up our local property taxes. So I'll be voting against it.
Your objection is noted. Any other discussion?
Mr. Chair, I think this bill is probably the ultimate local control bill. It does allow the voters to make this decision and puts the question in front of them. This isn't the state saying you must have a tax cap. This is the state saying, do you want a tax cap? And letting them, those local voters, make the determination. So making sure that every voter has a chance, giving the plethora of data of conversations we've had around local property taxes, giving the voter an actual decision, a chance to vote on something that could manage their property taxes is probably the best form of local control we can do at the state.
Any further discussion? Motion is ought to pass as amended. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say nay.
Nay.
The ayes have it. And I'm guessing there will be an objection to consent.
Yes.
All right. Senator Lang, you've
Sure.
done a lot of work on this. You get to take it out.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Anything else to come before us before we adjourn? All right.
Move
do
to
I
come out
have
of
a
executive
motion?
session.
We have a motion to come out of executive
Second.
session. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say nay. Our business today being complete, we are adjourned.